In Python, the contents of a CSV file are commonly represented as a list of rows. There are two common choices for how to represent each row. In the first option, each row is a list. So then the overall data structure is a list of lists. In the second option, each row is a dictionary. This option works well if your CSV has a header, because then the keys of each dictionary can be column names, and the fields can be values. So then your overall data structure would be a list of dictionaries. Now, you could write the code to read in the data from a CSV yourself, and it wouldn't be too hard, but there are libraries already written to do it for you. Here I've written some code using Python's Unicode CSV library to read in the student enrollments and print out the first record. I'll go ahead and run the cell. This code is taken pretty directly from the example code on the CSV module's documentation page. There's a link to this page in the instructor notes. So in this code, first I create the list of enrollments. Then I open the file. The mode RB here means that the file will be opened for reading, and the B flag changes the format of how the file is read. The CSV documentation page mentions that I need to use this when I'm using this library. Next, you'll notice I'm using the dict reader, which means each row will be a dictionary. I chose this since our data does have a header row, and this will allow me to refer to each column by its name rather than its number. Now, the reader won't actually be a list of rows. Instead, it will be something called an iterator. If you're curious, you can learn more about iterators by following the link in the instructor notes. What you need to know here, though, is that the iterator lets you write a for loop to access each element, but only once. So if I were to add this second loop to print out all the rows in the reader, then actually nothing would be printed, because you can only loop over an iterator once. Since I'll want to access the data multiple times, I used my one loop to append each row to a list. And finally, I need to close the file. And then since this row is the last row in the cell, it gets output in the output area. And actually, this code is a bit lengthier than it needs to be in a couple of ways. The first is that I can avoid having to close the file by instead using a with statement. When I open the file using a with statement, I need to indent everything that accesses that file. Then, once the indented block ends, the file will automatically be closed. This is closer to how the example code in the CSV documentation page looked. And second, there's actually an easier way to convert an iterator to a list. Here, by calling list of reader, I've created a list of the enrollment data without using a loop. So now I can delete this line and this line. Now I'd like you to write code to read in the other two CSV files, and also take a look at the first row of each file to make sure it worked properly. In case you're still getting everything set up, you'll also be able to complete this exercise in the Udacity code editor at the end of this video. If you do, you can use test run to see the output of your code, and submit to see if your solution is correct. If you do have everything set up locally, then the starter notebook will contain the code that I've just written, as well as some other code you'll see later in the course. Find the point marked number 1 and add your code there. Make sure you name your variables daily engagement and project submissions, or some of the later code will not work.